They say that only the good die young, but what if I told you there's a place where the young don't just die, but disappear, vanishing into thin air without a trace? Welcome to Alcatraz, the island that devours hope. The year was 1962. The world was buzzing with change. The space race was heating up. Music was evolving. And deep within the cold waters of San Francisco Bay, something extraordinary was about to unfold. An event so daring, so bold that it defied the odds and challenged everything the authorities believed about the infamous prison known simply as Alcatraz. On June 11th, in the early hours of the morning, 3 men vanished from its walls, leaving behind a small boat and a big question mark. Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, 3 inmates at Alcatraz, known for housing some of the most dangerous criminals, became the focus of a manhunt that would become one of the largest in U.S. history. These men were no strangers to the law. In fact, they had a combined total of 157 years of prison time between them. But something had driven them to the edge, leading them to plan an escape that would make headlines around the world. But how do you escape from a prison that's surrounded by icy waters, designed to be escape-proof, with thick steel doors and high security? Well, these men had a plan that involved a lot of sweat, a lot of time, and a lot of noise. They created a diversion, keeping guards busy while they worked on their way out. They crafted makeshift tools out of everyday items like soap and toothpaste. They made holes in the walls of their cells, allowing them to shimmy through and make their way to the roof. From there, it was a long drop into the frigid waters of the San Francisco Bay. And that's where things get a little hazy. You see, the next morning, the alarm was raised. The men were missing. A search was conducted and a small boat was found, but the men were nowhere to be seen. The authorities believed they'd made it to freedom, but others weren't so sure. Could they have survived the cold, dark waters of the bay? Did they make it to shore, or did the treacherous currents claim their lives? To this day, the mystery remains unsolved, but one thing is certain. Their escape attempt was nothing short of brilliant. A symphony of sweat, strategy, and sheer determination. It's a story that continues to fascinate people around the world and inspire movies, documentaries, and books. If you've ever wondered about the real Alcatraz, the one behind the legend, then this is the video for you. We'll take you back in time to explore the history of this infamous prison, the stories of the men who tried to escape and the chilling tales of the ones who never made it out. So buckle up, because we're about to take a journey that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about Alcatraz. Imagine standing on a rocky island, surrounded by cold, turbulent water. The wind bites at your skin, and the fog rolls in like a living shroud. The only sounds are the cries of seagulls and the splash of waves against jagged cliffs. This is Alcatraz Island, once home to America's most feared criminals and guarded by some of the toughest law enforcement officers in the country. Here, escape wasn't just difficult, it was considered impossible. But what if the impossible was just a challenge waiting to be met? What if 3 determined men could outsmart guards, dismantle walls, and slip through iron bars, all under the watchful eyes of the prison staff? What if they built a raft from raincoats, fashioned life vests from scraps, and paddled through freezing water in the dead of night? These are the questions we will answer. Their names: Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. They weren't the first to try escaping Alcatraz, but their plan was by far the most sophisticated, and the only one to succeed in disappearing. In the next 2 hours, we'll explore every detail, from the prison's harsh conditions, the bred desperation, to the meticulous planning, the tension-filled night of the escape, and the decades of mystery that followed. You'll hear first-hand accounts, expert analysis, and startling discoveries, all woven together in a gripping narrative. So sit back and prepare to journey into the depths of one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Alcatraz Island wasn't always a prison. Long before it became the world's most notorious federal penitentiary, it was a military fortification, a key part of San Francisco Bay's defense system. The island's natural attributes made it a fortress long before it was used as a prison. Its rocky cliffs and turbulent waters were a deterrent to any would-be attackers, and its position, just 1.25 miles from the mainland, seemed both close and yet strangely unreachable. This made it the perfect place to build a prison. When the federal government turned it into a maximum security prison in 1934, Alcatraz was designed to hold prisoners who were too dangerous or too clever for other prisons. These were the elite of criminality: bank robbers, mobsters, murderers, men who had broken the law in the worst ways imaginable. But Alcatraz was more than just a jail. It was a symbol of absolute control. Guards were trained to watch every inch of the prison. Walls were thick with steel and concrete. Windows were small and barred. Armed guards patrolled the island day and night, and the water surrounding it was cold and fast-moving. It was designed so that no one could escape. If you were sent to Alcatraz, you were considered a menace, too dangerous or too unruly to be housed anywhere else. The reputation of Alcatraz was as brutal as its architecture. Prisoners were kept in near solitary confinement, subjected to strict routines and harsh punishments. The cold, damp air seeped through the cells, and the constant clang of steel echoed their captivity. Escape wasn't an option. The water surrounding Alcatraz was notoriously cold and treacherous. Even if you made it past the guards and the fences, the currents would likely pull you under, and the icy depths would be your final resting place. Of the hundreds of inmates sent to Alcatraz, only a few would make it out alive. Many would find themselves forever trapped within its cold, unforgiving walls, their lives a distant memory as they faced the harsh realities of their new existence. So if you ever find yourself in San Francisco, take a moment to look out over the bay. And if you see Alcatraz, remember that it's more than just a tourist attraction. It's a reminder of a time when the law was enforced with an iron fist, and the consequences of a crime were nothing short of terrifying. Thanks for watching. See you next time. But despite all the security, prisoners still looked for ways to escape. From the very first days of the prison, men tried to break free. Some jumped into the freezing waters, hoping to swim to freedom. Others planned elaborate schemes. Yet none succeeded. The cold currents and strong tides of San Francisco Bay made swimming nearly impossible. The guards were always alert, and the island's isolation was a nearly perfect trap. So when Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin started plotting their escape, they knew the odds were against them. But they also knew that desperate times called for desperate measures. This was no ordinary prison break. It was a masterclass in patience, creativity, and daring. Frank Morris was a man of sharp intellect, known for his quick mind and calm demeanor. He had spent years studying the prison's routines, weaknesses, and even its geography. The Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, were the muscle. Both tough, resourceful men with criminal records that spoke of countless brushes with the law. Together, they formed a team unlike any other. They began quietly, digging behind their cell walls, inch by inch, with makeshift tools fashioned from spoons and other scraps. They created false ventilation ducts to hide their work. They fashioned dummy heads from plaster, soap, and even human hair to fool the guards during bed checks. And they constructed a raft, not from wood or metal, but from raincoats, sewn together with painstaking precision. Every detail was meticulously planned. The time of escape was chosen carefully. A foggy June night, when visibility was low and guards' attention was distracted. The tides were studied, the currents calculated. They knew they had only a small window to make it from Alcatraz to the mainland. And then came the night. June 11th, 1962. The night that changed everything. The clock was ticking. Inside Alcatraz, the prison was winding down for the night. The guards made their last rounds. The prisoners retreated to their cells. But in cell block B, the atmosphere was electric with silent urgency. Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin moved with practiced precision. Their hands were raw and aching from months of digging, but the tunnel behind the walls was finally complete. Behind the walls, the air was stale and thick. The narrow crawl space was just wide enough for one man at a time to squeeze through. One by one, the men slipped silently into the darkness. Each step was a risk. The slightest noise could mean discovery, the end of everything. Meanwhile, on the surface, the fog rolled in thick, a natural cloak over the island. The cold breeze whispered over the rocky shore as the currents in the bay began their nightly dance. Strong, unpredictable, deadly, this was the moment they had prepared for. The narrow window when the tides would give them a fighting chance. The three men emerged from their tunnels into the utility corridors. Dark, echoing halls lined with pipes and cables. They avoided the main corridors, sticking to shadows and quiet corners. Every footstep was measured, every breath controlled. Next came the most daring part of the plan. The makeshift raft, made from dozens of raincoats sewn together with fishing line, patched with glue, and inflated with stolen air pumps. This fragile vessel was their only hope of surviving the treacherous waters. They had also crafted life vests, again from raincoats, cleverly disguised beneath their prison garb. They carried their raft and bags of supplies. Chocolate bars, water, even homemade paddles, fashioned from stolen materials. They reached the shoreline, hearts pounding, the fog swirling around them, and then they launched. The raft slipped silently into the black water. The cold bit at their skin. The chill was relentless. Currents tugged and pulled. The city lights twinkled in the distance. Freedom just beyond the horizon. Paddling was slow. The raft was flimsy, and every wave threatened to capsize them. The night stretched on, minutes feeling like hours. Would they make it? Could they survive the freezing cold, the swift currents, the dangers lurking beneath? Back on the island, the morning guard would discover the empty cells. The alarm would sound. The search would begin. And then, silence. No confirmed sightings. No bodies found. Only questions. The morning sun rose over San Francisco Bay, casting light on a prison now haunted by a chilling mystery. The cells where Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers once slept were empty. Guards scrambled. The alarm blared, and the manhunt began. But the three men, they had vanished like ghosts. The official search was intense. Boats scoured the waters. Helicopters combed the skies. Officers searched nearby shore. No trace, no body, no signs. The U.S. Marshals conducted one of the most extensive manhunts of the era. Yet, despite weeks of searching, no confirmed sightings were made. The conclusion: the men had drowned in the icy waters, swept away by unforgiving tides. But what if they didn't? The family of the Anglin brothers insisted otherwise. They claimed one of the brothers had contacted them years later, seeking help. Relatives shared stories of mysterious visits, unconfirmed sightings, and whispered secrets passed down through generations. A niece recalled a man showing up on her doorstep in Florida in the late 1970s, weathered, almost unrecognizable. He said little but left a lasting impression. A man who had escaped Alcatraz. Law enforcement was skeptical, But the mystery only deepened when a fisherman in the 1970s found what appeared to be homemade flotation devices near Angel Island, where these remnants of the escapees' raft. For decades, numerous tips and claims surfaced. A family in Brazil reportedly identified the Anglins living under assumed names. Other reports placed them in Florida, Oregon, even Mexico. The FBI kept files open for decades. In 2013, they officially closed the case, stating no evidence the men survived beyond the escape. Yet, the debate rages on. Experts and enthusiasts analyze every piece of evidence. The homemade raft, the timing of tides, the physical fitness of the men, and even the psychological resolve necessary to survive such a desperate flight. Mythbusters, the popular science show, put the escape to the test. They built a replica raft, timed their swim with the tides, and despite the freezing waters and strong currents, they made it, proving it was plausible, if not probable. But the cold waters of San Francisco Bay are brutal. Hypothermia is a silent killer. Would adrenaline alone carry them through the freezing swim? Then there's the puzzle of no recovered body. Some argue that the strong currents and scavenging wildlife would have claimed any remains before discovery. Others believe it's simply too coincidental, that bodies would have surfaced eventually. There's also the haunting question of why no one came forward. If even one of them had survived, why not reveal the truth before death? Could fear of capture, or the need to protect loved ones, have kept them silent? Or did they disappear into the shadows of new lives, forever fugitives in the fabric of American folklore? This story of escape, hope, and mystery has captured imaginations for over half a century. The greatest prison break of all time, a daring plan executed against impossible odds, an ending that remains uncertain. The truth may never be fully known, but the legend lives on, in books, documentaries, films, and the endless curiosity of those who dare to wonder. Alcatraz was more than a prison. It was a symbol, a fortress of fear, a final stop for America's most notorious criminals. And in the early hours of June 12, 1962, that symbol was cracked. The daring escape of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers didn't just challenge the idea of impossible, it challenged the very notion of confinement. Though the prison closed only 5 years later, in 1967, its legend has only grown. Tourists flood the island each year, wandering the same halls where these men once plotted their freedom. Visitors peer inside the cells, stand beneath the ruined skylights, and gaze out over the choppy waters of the bay. They feel the ghosts of the past. The 1962 escape has inspired countless films, books, and documentaries. Movies like Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood, have immortalized the story, blending fact with fiction to create a gripping narrative of ingenuity and survival. But the real story, the raw truth, is just as fascinating, if not more so. The meticulous planning, the handmade tools, the stolen moments, a testament to human will and creativity. Frank Morris was no ordinary prisoner. With an IQ reported around 130, he was the brains behind the operation. The Anglin brothers brought strength and determination. Together, they forged a bond and a plan that would shake the nation. The escape wasn't just about running away. It was a rebellion against the system, a fight for life and dignity. Even decades later, their story fuels debates. Did they survive? Are they still out there somewhere? Or were they swallowed by the unforgiving waters they dared to cross? The unanswered questions fuel the legend, and legends have power. Alcatraz's story also serves as a lesson about resilience, about the complexity of human nature, about the lengths people will go to for freedom. It reminds us that no matter how high the walls, how strong the guards, The human spirit yearns to break free. Today, Alcatraz stands silent, its cells empty, but its stories loud, and every year, thousands continue to swim the bay, daring to follow in the footsteps, or rather, the footsteps and paddles, of those men who challenged the impossible. So, what do you believe? Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers survive their perilous escape, or did they become legends lost to the cold, dark waters? Their fate may forever be a mystery, but their story, that will never fade. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's greatest prison escapes. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories that captivate and inspire. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning. The Alcatraz escape was more than just a jailbreak. It became a cultural touchstone, an enduring story that continues to captivate, inspire, and puzzle us. Why? Because it challenges our assumptions about confinement, ingenuity, and survival. The myth and the man Frank Morris was a man who defied the labels placed on him by society. A genius among criminals. He meticulously planned every detail of the escape. But he wasn't just brilliant, he was patient, calculating, and, perhaps most importantly, willing to risk everything for a chance at freedom. Imagine the pressure. Days, weeks, even months of planning, carving away at the walls, constructing a raft out of raincoats and glue, forging dummy heads from plaster and hair, all under the watchful eyes of guards, in a place designed to be escaped. The Anglin brothers, muscle and loyalty, John and Clarence Anglin, were no less determined. They were brothers, in the truest sense fiercely loyal and physically strong. Their backgrounds were tough, marked by brushes with the law, but their spirits remained unbroken. Together, they worked as a team. When you picture the three of them, you see a trio united by desperation, intelligence, and hope. The challenge of the bay, the waters surrounding Alcatraz, are notoriously treacherous, cold, churning, with unpredictable tides and currents that could easily drag even the strongest swimmer to their death. Many have tried to cross these waters. Every year, the Escape from Alcatraz Triathlon challenges athletes to swim this very route, and it remains a formidable feat, even with modern gear and training. Could they have made it? This question has sparked endless debate. On one hand, the harsh conditions suggest a grim fate: hypothermia, drowning, or capture. On the other, tales from family members and mysterious sightings in the years following hint at survival. In 2013, the FBI closed its case, citing lack of evidence to prove either way. The Department of Justice declared the escapees likely perished. But for many, hope persists. The cultural ripple effect, the story of the Alcatraz escape has seeped deep into popular culture. Books, movies, documentaries, even video games have all drawn inspiration from this dramatic tale. Escape from Alcatraz, the 1979 film starring Clint Eastwood, remains a classic, portraying not just the escape, but the human emotions behind it. Fear, determination, camaraderie. It is a story that resonates, because it is about the primal human desire for freedom, a theme as old as time, legacy beyond the prison walls. Alcatraz itself transformed from a place of punishment to a symbol of resistance. Tourists now walk through the prison corridors, standing in the cells where men once dreamed of escape. The island offers a haunting reminder of history's complex layers, and every year, thousands attempt to swim from Alcatraz to the shore, a tribute to those three men's bravery and an homage to human endeavor. But the most tantalizing piece of the puzzle lies far beyond the foggy shores of San Francisco Bay. Over the decades, countless Rumors and stories have surfaced whispering that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers didn't simply vanish into the cold waters. They survived, escaped the grasp of the law, and found new lives in distant lands. One of the most persistent and intriguing theories places the escapees thousands of miles away, in the sun-baked streets of Morocco. According to several unverified reports and family testimonies, one of the Anglin brothers is said to have been spotted living under an assumed identity in a small Moroccan town during the late 1970s. These claims are bolstered by blurry photographs and letters passed down through family members, hinting at a secret life that began anew under the vast desert sky. The idea may sound far-fetched. After all, Alcatraz was meant to be and the men who fled were seasoned criminals facing decades behind bars. But consider the audacity and intelligence of Frank Morris, often described by guards as a mastermind with a sharp mind and relentless patience. It is not hard to imagine someone of his caliber plotting a path not just across the bay, but around the world, slipping quietly into obscurity. Relatives of the Anglin brothers have occasionally come forward over the years, telling stories of late-night phone calls or secretive meetings with mysterious men claiming to be long-lost family members. One nephew insisted he had contact with an uncle who had survived the escape and was living overseas, cautious but alive. The family never revealed exact locations, fearful of legal repercussions or unwanted attention. But these whispers fueled decades of speculation. Morocco, with its bustling ports and historic trade routes, would have offered a perfect hideout, a place far from American law enforcement, with its winding medinas and labyrinthine alleyways, providing endless cover. The escapees' ability to speak multiple languages and adapt to different cultures might have allowed them to blend in seamlessly, building new identities from scratch. Investigators and enthusiasts alike have chased these leads, following shadows across continents. But nothing concrete has ever been confirmed. Official records remain silent, and the U.S. Marshals' efforts to track the fugitives eventually faded into cold trails. Yet, the allure of the Morocco theory persists, because it embodies the core mystery of the Alcatraz escape. The tantalizing question of what happens to those who vanish against all odds. Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers succumb to the unforgiving waters, or did they rewrite their destinies under a foreign sun? This question keeps historians, conspiracy theorists, and true crime aficionados endlessly fascinated. A story that refuses to end, echoing the very spirit of those daring men who once dared to dream of freedom beyond the rock.